Hey folks, Rob here, bringing another Tactics 101. This time we're going to be talking about vehicle overruns. This is in Chapter D, Section 7, and it's going to be covering unarmored and armored vehicles. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of things, and let's get into it. So, what makes an overrun? Ineligible targets, because there are a couple. We're going to calculate firepower and die roll modifiers, how that all goes together. Defenders' reaction fire and how they can maybe stop you. And then we'll talk about attacking empty hexes and destroying unpossessed weaponry. Now, there's an article in Journal Number 8 by Carl Noguera, and it's called Crosstown Traffic. And I'm in the process of reading it right now. I haven't finished it yet, but it's a good 4 to 6 page article with lots of examples, and it's quite a good article so far. It goes over just what we're talking about, overruns. So if you have Journal Number 8, by all means, have a good read of it. And I'm going to be referring to the overrun flowchart, which comes in your rule book as well. Very handy. Lots of good tips, especially at the bottom, Defender's footnotes. Helps to explain a lot of things as well. So let's get into it. Now, what is an overrun? So this is a form of bounding first fire, which means that if you've already fired, then you'll not be able to use it. The exception, of course, is if you've already just done an overrun, you can do another one. So as long as you have movement points available and target available, you can continue to do overruns until you run out of movement points. Now, it's going to cost you a quarter of your move every time to do an overrun, in addition to which you'll have to pay cost of terrain. So there will be a finite limit you can do. Sometimes you may have to do bog checks, again, depending what you're doing. If you want to rush into a building, for example, half your movement points, woods, same kind of thing. And provided you pass your bog check, paid your quarter for your overrun, and so forth, you might be able to keep on going. You cannot declare a gun duel while doing an overrun. So when you're charging an enemy gun position, they're going to get that shot off on you. You're not going to be able to outgun them. Hopefully they miss, and then you can drive over them. But you're not going to be able to outgun them. Now, once their defensive first fire is taken care of, you're going to be able to get your overrun off. There is going to be a chance for some reaction fire, but typically the OVR is going to go first. And if you have any accompanying infantry, you might have a chance to get that taken care of as well. And any overrun and cost of terrain is usually going to be combined into one expenditure. There's a couple of exceptions, like if you want to do bypass, you don't have to declare an overrun because you're not going to be overrunning, obviously. However, if your intention is to enter a hex fully, then you have to declare it completely. If there is a concealed unit there, and only a concealed unit, then you would just declare the cost of terrain until such point as they decide to lose their concealment, and then you can declare the overrun separately. But typically, you're going to announce it as a combined expenditure, just the one time. Now, when it comes to HIP or concealed units, HIP units will have to be placed on board once you enter that location. Again, not in bypass, but if you fully enter a concealment terrain location, the unit will have to be placed on board beneath a concealment counter. They have a choice now. They can either drop it willingly, and you'll conduct your normal overrun once you've announced it, or they can take a patsy using the lowest morale in the stack. Leadership does apply, and then if they pass, they can retain their concealment. So dummies, if they are there, they can take a roll as well. If they pass, they retain it. If they fail, dummies are removed. The units that are there will lose their concealment, and they'll become pinned, which obviously is going to suck. Depending on the nationality, there's various modifiers. One patsy's for Italians, non-elite, Chinese, etc. You can see it there. And dummies use the 7 morale that's on the counter. There's some exceptions, obviously, like heroes and fanatics, berserk, those kinds of things. And any vehicle that's in bypass will not force the patsy, so you can save your units in defense that way as well. But again, if you are entering a hex fully and you have a concealed stack there, they must take a patsy, and if they fail, then they're going to become pinned, and they're also going to lose their concealment. So there's some ineligible targets. First of all, we got pillboxes. Now, since a vehicle cannot enter a pillbox location, it's NA. Also, AFVs are ineligible targets. However, if you have a crew exposed AFV, the crew exposed is a target. Now, you're not targeting the vehicle itself, you're targeting the vulnerable crew. So they'll get a +2 for being crew exposed, and therefore they are valid. You're just not attacking the tank or vehicle itself. Now, the presence of the AFV will not prevent you from doing an overrun. And if you have other non-armored units in the hex, by all means, you can still conduct the overrun. It just, again, you're not going to be targeting the AFV itself. You can't use reverse movement for obvious reasons when doing an overrun, and you cannot be in bypass to do an overrun as well. You cannot overrun the hex that you start in. You have to, much like a cavalry charge, you have to leave a hex, turn around, come back in if you wanted to do so. And then if you are, say, in a radialist platoon, you cannot combine multiple vehicles into a single attack, nor can you split your firepower into 2 or more attacks in a single hex. It's 1 attack per hex, right? Now, the firepower that we're looking at here is varied on the vehicles. If you have an unarmored vehicle, it's going to be a base of 1. An AFV is going to be a base of 2. An AFV with a manned and functioning MA, that's not one of those things listed there, is going to be a 4. So if you're looking at a Tiger, it's going to be a 4. If you're looking at an IFE capable half-track, it's going to be a 2. So the Quad 50 M36 GMC, I think it is, American, that's going to be a 2, even though it has 24 firepower IFE. To this, you're going to add the tripled and halved because of moving and triple point blank fire machine guns. So it could be quite lethal still, even though it's only a base of 2, right? And then there's other modifiers. If you have a half track with passengers and their crew exposed, you can triple and halve their fire. If you have riders and passengers, if you have a flamethrower, you'll use the full firepower. There's no halving of that. If flamethrower is attacking by itself, then you'll use the full firepower as well. If the overrunning vehicle should be bogged down, becoming immobile, or defending fire manages to destroy it, the overrun is still conducted, it's just at half firepower. And then if the Patsy is successfully passed, your firepower will be halved because the units will be concealed. And then lastly, the only leadership that applies is an armor leader typically. However, should the overrunning vehicle be crew exposed and you have a passenger leader, you can use their leadership value as well. Regarding defenders, normally their TM will apply unless the attacking vehicle is using only a flamethrower. Typically, flamethrowers do not use TM benefits. And any infantry cavalry in an open ground hex that are overrun will always have the FFMO applied to them. And this might be cumulative with other positive TMs. So entrenchments and shell holes, for example, could be offset with the -1. And any wall hedge that might be claimed is only applicable if the vehicle comes through that hex side. So if they come in from the back end, then you won't get the wall hedge benefit. Now, should the overrunning vehicle ever roll a 12, that means that one of their weaponry has malfunctioned, and the attack still goes through, but it just means one or more, depending on random selection, one of the weapons is malfed. Now, when it comes to an empty hex, and he wants to randomly destroy unpossessed guns or support weapons, and he rolls a 12, then the vehicle itself may become immobilized, depending again on what happens. All right, so looking at reaction fire now. Let's bring up an example here. This is from Twilight of the Reich. And what we're looking at here is we have a bunch of Russians attacking into German positions, and we have a T-34-85 ready to do some moving. So when it comes to the reaction fire, this happens during the movement phase, and it is the defender giving a chance to attack moving attacker. There's two types of reaction fire. There's CC, close combat reaction fire, which uses the close combat table, and then there's non-close combat reaction fire, which uses the to kill table or the IFT. Now, you can only use non-CC for overruns, and CC reaction fire, which also includes street fighting, is used to for vehicles that are in bypass or in street fighting case when you're between in a road hex side between buildings, which again we're going to cover that in a second here. You can use these as often as you're able to use first and final fire. Now, you must wait after making your first attack for MP expenditure. Remember, you can only do as many attacks as MPs have been expended. And any reaction fire versus overrunning vehicle is resolved immediately after the resolution of the overrun. So typically the OVR goes first, and then you can do the reaction fire. All right, so let's look at reaction fire now. Now, this is a form of close combat that takes place during the opposing player's movement phase when the vehicle enters the location. So here we have a T-34, and we want to put a vehicle into this hex here because it's going to give us some bypass sleeves for ease. So we're going to start it for 1. We're going to go here for 2. We're going to ignore the Panzerschreck for now. And by the way, this scenario is in 45, and I do have Panzerfaust, but again, we're just going to ignore that for now. Then we're going to move into bypass for a total of 4 move. And this unit here is now going to take a Patsy, and we're going to attack using a close combat reaction fire. So we take our Patsy, which we pass. If we had failed, we would become pinned in this location. Now we're going to attempt to attack the T-34 in close combat. So we look at our table. We have a CCV squad, so we have 5 as our base. However, it is a motion vehicle, and we're going to have to add a +2. So we're going to need a 3 or less to get a result. And we almost got it. So we rolled a 4, not good enough, and so the T-34 is going to be staying in motion, and we're going to be losing our concealment for that attack. Now, we're going to be marked with a first fire, and we're going to be marked with a close combat. All right. That is our first attack. Now, let's reset this, and we're going to start with the first fire. Let's say we moved another unit, and we already first fired, and we're going to do the same thing with our T-34. We're going to attempt another Patsy, and we made it again. Because we're under our first fire, we're still going to try our 3 or less. We failed. Now we're going to be flipped this over to a final fire, and again we're going to be marked with a CC. This is our second attempt, and we actually needed a 2 or less because we already marked with the first or final counter, and our CCV would be reduced by 1. It's not listed on the table here, but because we had already fired the first fire would reduce our attack by our CCV attempt by 1 as well. And then we'll do this once more. This time we're going to be under a final fire. So right now we're out of shooting. Our tank's going to come in again, having expended 4. Now we still must fire because we have an enemy unit in your location. Whenever an enemy enters your location, you must attempt to fire. So we have to take a Patsy. All right, we failed, which means we're not going to be pinned. And let's assume that we passed our Patsy, and we're going to attempt to do our 2 or less we need for our close combat. This is also going to act as a morale check. So if we roll an 8 or more, we're going to be broken. All right, so we rolled a 7, which means we're going to be pinned. All right, and we're also marked with the CC as well. So we're CC'd, we're pinned, and this nice and happy tank is unscathed. He can stay in motion. He also has another 12 move. he can now continue to do whatever he needs to do. He could try overrunning another tank or what have you. He actually hasn't done an overrun yet. So technically this guy hasn't fired. He can turn around and maybe overrun something else. All right, so let's take a quick look at street fighting. Now, some of this may be old news to you. Some of you may have not have done this, but street fighting occurs whenever we have two buildings with a road in between. So we have a tank in between two buildings and a road. On a road hex, he can be attacked with street fighting. Or, in this case, we have a squad that's in a building. If the tank is in bypass between the road and another building in your hex, he can also be attacked using street fighting. If this guy was not here and he was in bypass of the other building, he would not be eligible for street fighting. If he's in bypass on your side of the road, however, he would be. All right. So either on the road or on your side of the road, he would be eligible. On the far side of the road, he would not be eligible. And all that means is they're really susceptible to ambush when they're in this kind of a scenario. So our tank, again, we'll give him 3 moves. Start for 1, 2, 3. Our German's going to attempt to do street fighting, so he needs a patsy, which he passes. He's going to jump onto the tank. Street fighting ambush is going to be a -1. And with a base of 5, we have a +2 for being in motion with a -1 for street fighting. Gives us a net +1. So we're going to need a 4 or less. And we rolled a 12. Random.org. All right, so then we come back into your start location. We would lose this. And we're marked with our first fire and our CC to show that we can't do that again. So street fighting is fairly simple. It only can occur when you meet those conditions. A tank has to be on the road or on your side of the road in bypass. Any mines, wire, smoke, FFE, OBAs, that kind of stuff, you'll have to go through all that if it exists. So obviously you may not want to. Why be attacked needlessly? Once the attack is complete, you return to where you started from. You're not going to get a free move to go across the road. You go exactly back to where you were. So if this building had been mined, you would have to take your attack going out. And when you come back, you're marked with a CC and a first fire when you are finished. And then you must pass your patsy when you go in the attack. Again, if you fail your patsy, then you're going to be marked with a pin. So there's a lot to remember with street fighting, but having an extra -1 with the attack is never a bad thing. You throw on a hero, maybe a negative leader, maybe ATMM, and you can quickly decimate tanks in some dense urban fighting. All right, so let's look at non-CC reaction fire. So this again happens in the movement phase by the defender. You must not be broken, and you cannot be beneath CC and or melee counter. So let's have a German 20 long here, and we're going to have our T-34 is going to come around the building. He's going to see the tank, the gun there, and he's going to try and overrun it. So we're going to come here. We're going to go through here. We're going to do a bog check. And we're going to pass our bog check. We're going to do an overrun attack. And again, the gun is going to have to wait until after the overrun before it can attack. Once more, we're going to have a base 4 for the AFV, to which we're going to add 6 tripled is 18, halved is 9. So again, we're 13 down on the 12 with a +1 because of the woods. So this time we have an 8, which is a 1 check. So this would break them, but let's say for the sake of argument that we pass our morale check, we're fine. Now the gun itself is going to get a chance to do non-CC reaction fire. So the first thing we do, as you can see here, we're going to rotate our gun to match the orientation of the tank. And because normally we would be paying for that rotation with case A and case E, We do not apply that when we're doing our non-reaction. So if you look at our gun here, when the tank first entered, we had a choice, right? We could have fired our defensive fire at the tank, or we could hold our fire, let the tank do its overrun, hope we make it, and once we make it, then we know that we're going to get an automatic rear hit. We know that we're not going to have to pay case A and case E. All we're going to have to do is pay for the motion vehicle, which is a +2. All right, so we're going to have a base 10. We're going to have a +2, which means an 8 or less to hit, and it's going to be a rear shot. You look at your gun, which is for us is going to be a 20 long, and 20 long is a base 6. We're at 0 hex range, which means we're going to be at a +2, and brings us up to an 8. Now, a rear shot is always going to be another +1, which brings us up to a 9. So we went from a potential 6 to a 9, and if you look back here, the rear armor is going to be either a 6 or an 8. So we've drastically improved our ability to affect the tank by waiting for him to do his overrun. Now, again, it's only a 20 long, which is not the greatest, but if you had a better gun, obviously your chances of killing the tank would be a lot better. Do we have any special? No, we don't. We only have limber fire. If, for example, this had been the 75 that we have over here, even fired an APCR, what's a 75 long? Yeah, 17. 0 hex range would be a +1, and 18 rear would be a 19 in the rear shot, assuming it's not a critical. So a 19 would be a guaranteed kill, possibly even a flame on a 8 or less. So we get the free rotation, even though we're in woods. We don't have to pay the case A, which is for us would be a +6. We don't have to pay for the +2 for fire within the X. We get an automatic rear shot, and we get a further +1 because again it's firing into the rear of the tank. And then we take our shot. We missed anyway, so no harm, no foul. But we managed to live. Then the Russian tank can carry on with what it's doing if it wants to stay in motion and tie up the gun, or if it wants to exit. Maybe it wants to stay here and try and pop smoke with its smoke discharger of 6, which it failed. So, but again, that's just a quick look at non-reaction, non-CC reaction fire. So as a gun owner, you have to make a decision. Do you try and shoot the tank before it enters overrun? Or do you wait for it to do its overrun, hope to live, and then take your free shot in the rear, or something in between? Now, when it comes to things like Molotovs and flamethrowers and DCs, again, you're going to be attacking the target's rear automatically. Molotovs cannot be used when you're marked with first final counters. Again, you must be forced to use your final fire or intensive fire if you're already so marked. And if you have your final fire, you must do final protective fire, just like with normal CC reaction fire. So if you are marked with this, then it is going to become a morale check as well. You always must shoot at a unit when it enters your hex. It doesn't matter what you have with you or what you're marked as. You must always attempt to shoot something that enters your hex. And if it's a final fire, then it also doubles as a morale check. Now, we haven't talked about half tracks yet, but typically passengers can contribute to overrun attacks, and or you can also shoot them as part of defending fire in your CC reaction fire as well. All right, as we said with FPF non-close combat reaction fire, it doubles as an NMC for the defender. You must use it when you are being overrun. If it is an unarmored vehicle, then obviously it doesn't matter, as long as there's no passenger, rider, crew along with it. and you must use your triple point blank fire, any ordnance support weapons as well, flamethrowers, that kind of thing. If you're pinned, and obviously you can't use those kinds of support weapons, and maybe if you're allowed to use CC reaction fire instead, those are some exceptions to the above. But typically, if you're marked with the final fire, you're going to have to use final protective fire for armored vehicles when they enter your hex. When it comes to gun crews, if you're marked with one of those markers, then when you're overrun by a something besides an unarmored vehicle, you're going to have to do FPF as well. And if you are marked with the first fire, you're going to have to intensify or sustain fire if you have a support weapon. If you are marked with a final intensifier or a no fire counter, then you're going to have to engage in close combat or triple point blank fire. Your choice as the owner, but you're going to have to do one of those if you're marked with a final fire counter. And lastly, let's look at a 9.74 random support weapon gun destruction. This is something that could be done either when you enter a hex with possessed weapons or if you enter an empty hex with abandoned weapons. So whenever you do an overrun and you get a KIA result against units possessing weapons, there's a chance you could destroy those weapons. You must check the IFT column. You roll a single die, and if you get another KIA result, that support weapon gun is destroyed. If you get a K/ result, then that weapon is malfunctioned. If it's already malfunctioned, then it's destroyed. And if it has a X number, like a flamethrower, for example, or a DC, then it's destroyed as well. There's a -1 die roll modifier to that die roll if it is a fully tracked AFV. Also, when doing an overrun and you're a fully tracked AFV, you can also try and destroy unlimbered or no movement and restricted fire, no movement guns. Again, unless they are in entrenchments, in which case you cannot. And then finally, when you have unpossessed support weapons and guns in a hex, if you enter that location, you end your movement phase, then you could automatically destroy any gun or support weapon. Again, provided that you don't, they're not an entrenchment, you just pay normal overrun costs. So you're going to have to spend a quarter of your move, you're going to have to pay cost of terrain, and you're spinning, you're pivoting in place, and then you'll be able to destroy any support weapon gun automatically in that location. All right, so that was a quick overview of the tactics around overruns and how they're applied. Reaction fire is, again, something Defender can use against the overrunning vehicle. Typically, this is something you do with half tracks, armored half tracks, and tanks. You could use unarmored vehicles, I suppose, as a last gasp measure, but typically this is something that an AFV would do. And you do it against weak unarmored vehicles or low morale troops. You don't want to start tackling assault engineers with DCs and flamethrowers. Your vehicles are just going to start dying. Similarly, you may want to avoid trying to charge into a gun line for the same reasons. They're going to start blowing you up. But given the circumstances, those may prove viable options. And if nothing else, you can pin them down just so that they can't pester you. Remember that as long as you're inside that hex, they can't do anything else but deal with whatever's inside that hex. So as a defender, remember your gun will rotate automatically so it's orientated in the same direction as the vehicle. It gets you that free shot in the rear, and you don't have to pay the penalties for rotating within the hex. Very handy if you're in the woods or building. And yeah, just remember that rule as a defender. Attackers know when to overrun, know when not to. Bear in mind that even if you become immobile, you fail your bog check, your attack will still go in. You're just going to reduce your firepower by half. And then lastly, on defenders, remember, if you decide to retain your concealment, making your patsy, that the firepower will be coming in at you at half firepower. So again, there's a reason you may want to retain your concealment. Maybe you want to drop it depending when, that kind of thing. So hopefully this has again been of some use to you guys. If I've missed anything or misrepresented something, make sure you let me know. And I liked more ideas on future tactics 101s, or if you want me to go more in depth on something. Reaction fire probably could use its own article. Again, speaking of articles, Carl Noguera's article in journal number 8, Crosstown Traffic on Overruns, is quite handy. I recommend it highly. Make sure you have a good read of that. And join up my Discord. Links down below in the description. It's starting to take off, so join up. I'd like to hear some recommends on videos that you want to see. And we'll see you guys next video. Bye-bye.